Okay, so again, welcome to the Container Gardening Workshop. We're so excited. This has been an idea that has been sort of coming to fruition for a while now. So really excited we're able to make it happen with everyone. So first, to start out, the containers. The first thing that really can be considered is the size of the container. So when you're considering the size, consider what exactly you want to be planting in your container. So consider the root depth and also the spread of the roots when determining the proper size. And so if you're thinking of growing shallow rooted vegetables, think about maybe 6 to 9 inches for chives, lettuces, green onions, radishes, and spinach. 12 to 18 inches for moderate depth vegetables, which include eggplant, peppers, beets, broccoli, carrots, cauliflower, celery, chard, kale, and peas. And then the biggest pot that you can find, 18 to 24 inches for more deep rooted vegetables. So your tomatoes, potatoes, zucchini, winter squash, beans, corns, and cucumbers. So a lot of those things you would be growing over the summer. And Catherine also has a link to share. This provides, very brief information about sizing recommendations, but the link that Catherine will share and that she shared in the email before this meeting gives more specific recommendations for each plant that you may plan to plant. And as well, the UC Master Gardeners is a really great resource if you want to look them up for sizing recommendations or really any sort of planting recommendations. The next thing we're going to consider when we're talking about our containers is the drainage. It's really important that the containers that you're growing in have drainage, and that's going to allow excess water to drain out of the container and prevents the roots from sitting in water and potentially rotting. So you can either use a container that has pre-existing holes, or depending on the material of the container you have, you can drill holes into the bottom. With this, be aware of potentially clogged drainage, especially if you only have small holes that are allowing the water to drain out. It might get clogged with soil or rocks or other particles. And so just be observant with that and see if you notice anything and check on the drainage every once in a while. As well, something that has come up and that some people think about and talk about is whether you should add gravel or crushed up pots or whatever it may be at the bottom of your pot to help with the drainage. And actually, the resources that we've found and in our experience, that's not necessary. It doesn't actually help that much with drainage. So there's no need to put anything at the bottom of your pot to help with drainage. Just those drainage holes are going to be sufficient. And then the last thing that we can talk about with containers is the material. You can use plastic, clay, wood, metal containers. For this workshop, I went to a couple of local plant nurseries this week, and they were throwing away or recycling plastic containers that they weren't using anymore. So if you want to pick some of those plastic containers up from a local nursery, you totally can. And that's a great way to get containers to plant in. Depending on the material that you select, just be aware that there are different, benefits and drawbacks of each. When I was looking into this more, metal containers, you might have to water more because it's going to be a little bit of a hotter, it's going to attract more heat and hold more heat. Something like plastic, especially if it's black plastic, might do the same thing. So depending on the material that you choose, it just being observant of the changes that it makes then to the soil and to the plant that you have. The next thing then that we want to think about is the soil that we're using. And so when you're looking to fill your container then with soil, go ahead and purchase organic potting soil that's meant for vegetables. So you're not going to be using a potting mix. Make sure you're going for a potting soil. And potting soil is specifically formulated for container gardening. And some brand names we have on there that might be easy when you show up to a nursery and there are potentially loads of options. Maybe look for Dr. Earth, Fox Farm, Happy Frog, and that might make it easier for you. So again, an organic potting soil. Where you can get those, there are local nurseries, Summer Winds and Yamagami's if you're in the Santa Clara area. Those are two great local nurseries, but check online if you're outside of Santa Clara for a local nursery in your area. And why this is important, using potting soil from a nursery is important because the soil from your backyard or garden will be more likely to get compacted and won't drain as well. If it's all you have, use what you got, but you might notice a difference in the way the plants are able to grow. And as well, when we're talking about the difference between potting soil and potting mix is going to be much lighter and often doesn't contain the microbiology that's needed to grow healthy organic plants. And so the potting soil will be living and it will have what you need to create that healthy soil and to allow your plants to really thrive and grow and produce good food. And so what you're going to do is take that potting soil and fill your container up to, just below the rim of the container. Now, when it comes to the plants, almost any plant that grows in the ground, you can grow in a pot too. Again, you might need a larger pot if you're looking for a tomato or a cucumber or zucchini plant, but it can be grown in a pot. So you have two options. You can either plant seeds in your container or you can plant a starter plant in your container. So looking for sourcing seeds, we at the Forge Garden use Johnny's Seeds. We use Seed Savers Exchange. And also you can get your seeds from a local plant nursery and they'll have, everything you're looking for. And again, with the starters, the Forge Garden has a spring plant sale that's coming up. So we'll be selling some of our starters. And if you're on the email list, then you'll get a notification about that when it's happening. As well, the Master Gardeners have a plant sale. So you can check online on Master Gardeners website, UC Master Gardeners, and you'll be able to see what plant sales they're having and when. And then also your local plant nursery is going to have plants for you to purchase. And the great thing about when we're talking about purchasing from a plant sale versus potentially a nursery is the plant sales are scheduled and timed perfectly for when the plants are supposed to be transitioned outside into your garden, into your container. So if you're buying from a plant sale, you know that you can take that starter home and plant it right away in your container garden. And then as well, your location and the conditions of each season determine the food that you can grow. And so you can search online for a seasonal planting guide or a vegetable planting chart for your local area. Catherine is going to go ahead and she has a link for a planting guide in the Santa Clara area. If you're not in the area, again, just go ahead online and it's a quick, easy search. And if you want to, this guide will also help indicate if you want to start your own starters as opposed to purchasing them. If you want to start your own starters from seed, this guide will also indicate the time to do so. And one other thing, that can be found online and also we can talk about briefly is, and that James will demonstrate as well later, is that some plants like to be started directly as seeds and some plants like to be started as starters. So today, we're going to plant Swiss chard that we have already as a starter, and we're also going to plant carrots that we're directly seeding, or radishes that we're directly seeding into the soil. And so consider that as well. There are some things that you'll want to plant as seeds directly into the soil, and some things you'll want to plant as starters that have already had some time to grow before bringing them into the container garden. And now I'll turn it over to Madeline for a little bit more information about maintenance and harvesting.
Great. Hi, everyone. So there's about 3 main concerns for maintenance, and that is where you're putting your container gardening, how much you're watering your garden, and then also pest control. So for location, you really want to put your garden where you're going to get maximum sunlight. So at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day is what is going to really make your plants thrive. And if you're getting less, be prepared for a little bit of disappointment because your plants really need that sun to grow. That's the most important part. And so you want to put your plants outside. If you have direct sunlight outside, that's definitely preferred. If your backyard is super shaded, or if you only have like a deck or a porch, really wherever you're going to get the most sunlight, putting it in a windowsill is completely fine if that's where you get the most sun, but you really want to maximize how much sun that's getting your plants are getting every day. Okay, next slide. Great. So for watering, you pretty much you really have to be observant. So you can stick your longest finger in the soil, see if it's damp all the way down. If it's damp all the way down, then you don't need to water it. If your soil feels dry, then you do need to water it. A good rule of thumb for that is in the winter months, you're gonna wanna be watering about every other day. And for the summer months, you wanna be watering every day. And also for smaller containers, they have less soil, so they're gonna dry out a little bit quicker, so be aware of that. And then also a good rule of thumb is just water. All your containers should have drainage holes at the bottom. So water your plant until the water starts draining out. That means that the plant doesn't need any more water. The soil is completely damp. And so yeah, just number one rule is be observant. So pest control. This year at the Forge, we've definitely experienced this because of the construction project right by our garden. We've had an increase with like rats and pests and stuff like that. So we've been using remay to cover our beds, so that would be an example of a physical barrier. So yeah, you can use covers or cages to protect your garden. If you have a certain pest that you know you're going to have to deal with, maybe search online what would be the best way to avoid that sort of pest. And then you can also use natural barriers like soap spray, chili pepper sprays, and neem oil spray. So then for harvesting, each of your plants are going to need to be harvested a little bit differently. So look online, see what your exact plant, how it needs to be harvested. For example, like a head of lettuce, you're just going to chop the head of lettuce right at the bottom. And then for a different plant like spinach, you're going to only be cutting off a few of the leaves and leaving a bigger leaf so the plant can still, get a lot of sunlight. For like smaller leaf plants like that, you don't want to completely like take off all the leaves because then you won't be able to get much more produce after that excuse me, initial cut. So yeah, it really depends on what specific plant you're working with, and all harvesting techniques, they really change depending on what you're harvesting.
Great, thank you so much. And so now we're going to go ahead and transition over to James, who is going to demonstrate, for those of you who were able to take some of the kits that we were able to put together at the Forge, he's going to demonstrate something very similar to what you have. And for those of you who are at home and don't have a kit, what he demonstrates is absolutely replicable in what you'll be able to do in what Madeline and I went over in this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to James, and he's going to demonstrate what it looks like to set up your container garden with soil and with seeds and a starter as well. So thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm James, and I'll take it away with doing a little demo of kind of how we're going to get started on our container garden using some plastic containers, and we have some seeds as well as some transplants to use. So like Madeline and Julia mentioned, there are a lot of steps in this process, and I'll go through just a basic way that we would go about it here at the Forge Garden, the procedure that we would take. And I'm going to start very simply with just a little lettuce plant here and a small, about a half-gallon plastic pot, which is about the minimum you would want to go for certain plants. So we'll start with just a lettuce in this container. That's kind of the configuration we're going to go with today. But there's a lot of other options. So maybe something like a Swiss chard. We're going to want to put the Swiss chard into a much bigger pot, maybe a 2 or 3 gallon pot, such as what we have right here. So these smaller half-gallon pots are about the smallest you're going to want to go for a container. And they're about, I'd say, 6 to 8 inches deep. And that's about the smallest you're gonna wanna go for a plant like this. So we have cilantro that's also gonna go in just a small pot. But again, there's many configurations that would work well. And so for a bigger pot, we can maybe go cilantro as well as some seeds, or maybe sorry, that was Swiss chard, but we can go cilantro as well as lettuce in a bigger pot if we have room for it. And that this bigger pot is going to give us a lot more options for combining, as well as growing maybe a bigger plant that needs more root space. So just to get started, we're going to use this lettuce. And just like Julia mentioned, this lettuce is in season right now. So we know that because it's in season, it's going to grow well this time of year, kind of this winter time. We're going to use a lot of in-season, we're going to use only in-season plants today. So we have a lettuce to start off with. And the first thing we're going to want to do is get a trowel, and we're going to want to dig a hole about the size of the root ball of our plant. So this transplant here is in a small plastic container that we used. We stepped it up from a seed from a really small tray into what is now kind of a medium-sized plastic container. And we're going to take all of this soil and the dirt that we have in this and transfer it over. So we don't just want to pull just the plant out. We're going to want to take the entire thing, including the dirt, and put it into our bigger pot, into our container. I'm just going to put it on the table here. Awesome. There we go. So we have a nice big hole that should accommodate all of what is in this container, which is our plant, as well as all of the root systems and our dirt as well. So I'm going to flip it upside down and be really gentle with the leaves and not try to snap anything. Our lettuce and our cilantro are pretty delicate, so we want to be really, really careful. And it should come right out. And so we have kind of the entire thing. It almost looks like I didn't take the container off. And we're going to set it right in there. Nice. And make sure that our plant is level with the top of our container. It doesn't stick up like a little mound or doesn't go down like a little valley. You want to make sure it's nice and flat. Then we can add a little bit of that soil that we took out. We want to add it around and kind of make it flat, like Julia had mentioned, because when we water it, we want our soil to be nice and level with kind of like the rim of our container here. So we're going to add our soil in all around. Perfect. And we want to make sure that we create a nice little structure for our plant. So when we have our plant in our container, it's really important that it's not just sitting above kind of our soil level, and then it can kind of get tossed around by wind, or maybe today some rain. And if we're messing around with our leaves, we want to make sure we're not pulling at the roots and yanking the plant around. So create a nice strong structure for our plant to really grow and be strong when we water it. And then this plant, or this container, has tons of holes on the bottom. It's a great container. It has probably 20 small holes on the bottom. So it's going to be really good at draining that water and keeping our plant nice and level with what we want to do. So we're going to water our plant now. I'm going to water it right on the table. And we want to make sure that we water it just like Julia mentioned, where we can see kind of some water start to spill out of the bottom. That's going to help us know that we've saturated all of our soil and given a really good chance for those roots to grow deep and strong, so that when our plant is ready to grow and get sunlight, it has a really nice strong root base and can grow up and out and do what it wants to do. So I'm going to water right here on the table. Maybe I can show you guys. Ooh. Let's see. Nice. It's hard to tell, but it's coming out, right? We want to water all around our plant, not just right on it, but all around. Get the entire surface of the soil or container wet. And then we should see some water start to drip out of the bottom of these holes. That's how you know you've done a good job of saturating that soil and really giving your plant a good head start in its growth and its life. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grow another configuration, which is that same kind of half-gallon container. And we're going to grow cilantro. So cilantro is a great thing to grow right now. It's kind of, these guys can be kind of loose. So when we put this guy into our container, we're going to really want to make sure that we pile the soil up against our roots really, really strong, because this guy can kind of flop around, and you're going to see it with our Swiss chard as well. We want to really create a nice, strong space for these plants to grow up and out. So we don't want to put it into our new container from its transplant container and have it be flopping sideways and start kind of growing in a really weak cycle. So that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dig that hole. And then again, we want to kind of maybe put our fingers around this cilantro and kind of pop it out. You can see lots of roots and stuff going on here, but we want to make sure we're getting most of this dirt and putting it in so it can continue its cycle. So we're putting it in and see how it's kind of fallen sideways a little bit. So we want to make sure that we create a nice little barrier and we get it standing up and we make it really nice and strong. So we're going to bring our soil in. Nice. So we're going to pack it in nice. There we go. The rain's picking up. I'll try to talk louder. But here we go. Look at this. Now here we go. It's standing up nice and straight. Looks great. And we're going to give it another water, making sure that we water it enough that the water is going to come out of these bottom holes. Okay. We have another container with lots of holes in the bottom. So we're going to get a nice, good water. Perfect. Nice. We have some water dripping out of these holes, and that's how we've done. That's how we know we've done a decent job. All right, and lastly, we have our last container here. This is our big container, and this is going to be kind of our best option if we're growing multiple plants or we want a plant that's going to grow really big. So Julia mentioned how some plants have kind of a deeper root system and kind of the middle to deeper root system, and that's going to be something like our Swiss chard, or in this case, our seeds today. We have some radishes as well as carrots. So these two, as well as our chard, are going to want a nice deep root system. So you're going to want to give it a bigger container, definitely over 2 gallons, or at least a gallon. And we're going to space these two out. So we're going to put our chard on one half, and then we're going to put some seeds. We'll do some radish seeds today on the other half. So we'll be able to plant 2 in one container, and that's going to be a good setup. We can also maybe do 2 cilantros in here, or 2 lettuces, or maybe even 1 Swiss chard if we just want to do 1 Swiss chard. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plant this Swiss chard, and it's kind of big. It's grown really to its end here in the transplant container. So we know it's definitely time to move on. This guy is gotten a lot bigger than the container can hold. So we're going to move on and dig a hole. Now we're going to be really careful with our leaves here because these guys can snap and break really easily. So we're going to kind of hold this plant and make sure it doesn't come flying out. We're going to push it right out of our container. Nice. We're going to place this whole thing in nice and gently. And then we're going to get that soil and kind of fill it in. Good. Awesome. So our chard is in there nice and strong. I've made sure to bring my soil up just around the edges here so it has a nice system to stay strong. And now we have all this room left over. We have about a half of this container to work with. And so what are we going to do? I think I'm going to put some radishes in it today. So we're going to do maybe in a container like this, when we have maybe a half a square foot of space, I'm going to do no more than 25 seeds total. So we can leave our container and leave this, make a nice flat surface for our seeds. So we want to give them a nice flat area, no mountains or valleys again, because then if we do that and we water it, some might get a little bit more water than they want and some might not get any. So we want to make sure it's nice and level and loose, airy soil. we're gonna get our radish seeds. I'm gonna get a bunch on my hand. Nice. And then I'm gonna sprinkle them on maybe about one every half inch. So just maybe if you draw a little line with your finger, kind of work on only that half of the container. We don't want to overcrowd our Swiss chard over here because it's going to need its own roots and its own soil to do work. So I'm going to sprinkle some seeds about one every half inch because not every seed is going to sprout, but we want to put as many as we can to give it a good shot, give them a good shot of growing. So I'm just kind of rolling them off my finger, one every half inch or so. And this can be pretty loose, but not too many. We don't want to just cover the entire half of our container. So that should be about right, about 25 or so. And then what I'm going to do once I've placed all these seeds is I'm going to get just a small handful of soil, and I'm just going to sprinkle it on right over. So these aren't down about a half inch or an inch or anything. We're just covering our seeds with soil. Nice. So now we have our radish seeds on one half and our chard on the other. But when we plant something like a direct seed into a pot, I notice how I said kind of one every half inch as well as kind of 25 seeds. That's a lot for half of what this pot would be. So what's going to happen is once we start to see these radishes sprout, we're going to want to be careful and come back and do what's called thinning. So thinning is when we come back and we look at what we planted, and we plant a little bit more than kind of what we, I guess, want to grow and what's able to grow. So in order to make sure that the radishes that we want to grow are going to be successful, we come back and we see maybe, wow, there's 2 or 3 that are within a little inch section, and that's just too many. So we're going to thin out, i.e. just pull the leaves, pull the little sprouts out of kind of that section that we've dedicated for the radishes, so that there really is only one radish that's being sprouted every half inch to inch. And then the other ones we're just pulling out so that there's room for all the radishes that we want to grow, because these have a nice deep root system and they want to grow under the soil, and we want to give them the best chance. If we just leave it all in there, it's going to overwhelm the soil and overwhelm this pot, this container that we have. So we're gonna come back after we've noticed them sprouting, and we're going to start to kind of pull and pluck at the ones that we see kind of right next to each other, crowding each other's space. And that's going to give everything kind of the best chance of growing in a pot like this, where we have seeds as well as kind of a transplant in here. So this is going to be a good setup for a big 2-gallon container. And again, I'm going to give this guy a nice water, especially with these seeds. We want to cover the entire surface of our container here. We don't just want to water over the chard and just kind of over a section of these seeds. We want everything to get a little water. It's all thirsty in there. So we're going to cover it with a good amount of water, a healthy amount of water. This is a big container, so water coming out the bottom might take a little bit, but we're going to make sure that we at least cover the top and give it a healthy watering the first time around. Nice. So now we've covered the top, and it might take a second for this water to reach the bottom, but this is a good amount of water just to get started. We want to make sure it's nice and wet. All right, that should be perfect. So here's our setup. We have our 2-gallon container with our seeds and our Swiss chard. And then we have our 2 smaller containers, one with our cilantro and one with our lettuce here. And that's going to be a good setup for these sizes of containers. And that's going to help us maximize what we can grow. Thanks everyone for tuning in for the demo. And we're definitely going to have a lot of questions, I anticipate, and I can see in the chat. So we're going to open the floor up, and kind of everyone here at the Forge is going to be here to answer questions for you all. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, James. That was a great demo. We've got plenty of time for a Q&A. I will run through some of the questions that have come up in the chat, and we all may answer them together, or yeah. So let's see. All right, let's see. We had a question that came in about how to keep soil living. So how do you keep your soil healthy? I have one houseplant that keeps getting mold in the soil, and I only water every few weeks. I want to avoid this with my new plants. So my answer for this question would be to make sure that your soil is draining properly. It could be that you have really compacted soil, and so when you are watering, the roots of your plants are sitting in water, and this is a big part of your soil choice with container gardening, is making sure that you have soil that is well draining. A good idea might be, if you have a house plant, which we didn't really focus on house plants in this, we were mainly looking at growing vegetables, but you may want to remove that house plant and repot it, every year or so. So by kind of loosening up the root system and adding some more new soil in there. So that would be my suggestion for that one. How can you tell which veggies are better with a seed starter? This is a great question. Julia, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course. I know I touched on it a little bit briefly earlier. And one general rule of thumb that I sort of think about is root vegetables are going to grow better if you're seeding them directly. So because you're going to be harvesting the root, it doesn't really like to be disturbed if you're taking it from a pot and then putting it into the soil. If you're taking it from a starter and then putting it into the soil, because you're harvesting the root of the plant, and so that really needs to grow and be strong. And if you're disturbing it, a fourth of the way into its life, it's not going to be too happy. So anything like carrots, radishes, potatoes, obviously you're gonna plant directly into the soil, but carrots and radishes and beets are things that you can seed directly into the soil. Root veggies that you're not going to want to disturb, and start them first. Anything else, you really can start in the greenhouse or buy as a starter ahead of time, and that's just going to make it so that it's going to help you be able to have a plant right when the weather gets nice outside. You can put the starter outside, and you're going to be able to harvest from that plant much earlier than if you seed it at that time. And so that's generally the rule of thumb. I don't know, Catherine, if you have anything to add to that as well.
All I would add is that in that link that I shared in the chat that links to the Master Gardener planting calendar, it says which plants can be direct seeded and which plants should be transplanted. So that's what, direct seed and transplant, those are generally the terms we use when we're referring to planting directly in the soil with seeds, direct seeding, or transplanting, taking a young plant and planting that in the soil. So there's generally clear expectations of what plants do better with which method. Great. Okay, so there was a question that came in. Kathleen had a question about some of the soil mixes at Summer Winds, and unfortunately I am not familiar enough with Summer Winds' like green bag or blue bag to give you a good recommendation there. We're lucky here at the Forage Garden. We actually make all of our own potting mix, and we use a combination of coconut coir, compost, soil, and then we add in our own fertilizer. So that's actually the mixture that we're using here at the Forge. So I unfortunately don't get over to Summer Winds to buy their bagged soil that often, and don't know the different colors there. But what I would say is that you are looking for what we would recommend is a soil mixture that is very light. So something that is, has either peat or coconut coir mixed into it, but that isn't sterile. So often a lot of potting mixes are sterilized. And what happens in that process is you're losing a lot of the microbiology and a lot of that good stuff in there that helps plants really thrive and grow. So that's our recommendation. So I would talk to the folks over at Summer Winds or any other nursery that you visit to learn a little bit more about what their soil mixes are. And then there was a question that came in about remay. Madeline, can you take that one? It was something that you had discussed about remay. When Madeline can explain what that is.
Yeah, so I'm having trouble finding what the specific question was.
Oh, it was just I think the question was she was confused of what remay is.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so remay is it's made out of polyester, but it's non-woven polyester, so it looks and acts a lot like cloth. It allows 70% of sunlight through the cover, so it's still great to put on top of your garden, as well as it lets rain and overhead irrigation go through it, so it's not gonna really disrupt your plant's growing process too much. It also helps like little baby plants have more of a windbreak. You're gonna want to use some sort of, we use like they kind of look like half dome wires that we bend and then stick them in either side of the bed. So there's like a little arch here, and then lay the cloth over it. So there's a little bit of space above the plants are not just like completely squashed by the cloth. So you can use like wood sticks or stakes to kind of like prop that cover up, and then use something to like stake it down, so that cloth stays above the plant, and also covering it because you're using it to defend against pests. So you want that to be secure and strong and covered on all sides so no one can sneak in.
So you use that in pots?
You could. I would probably recommend using a wire, something that's wire for a pot. Remay could be used though, like draped over the entire pot with a stake in the center. You know, you might stake it and then surround the pot with the row cover is another term for remay. Thanks, Madeline. Great. Okay, we have a question about soapy water spray. So this is something that's used for when an organic, very gentle method of getting rid of small body insects. So things like aphids are the main one that we would use a soapy water spray for. And the general recipe for that is we would fill one quart spray bottle with water and then add about 2 tablespoons of soap to that. I recommend Dr. Bronner's, something that's not going to have a lot of chemicals in it. You know, you want something that's natural, a natural soap. And you just mix it up and then spray it directly onto the insects that you're trying to kill. So it doesn't work to just kind of spray the leaf if you haven't actually touched the insect. So you're really trying to saturate the aphids with that soapy water spray to actually kill them. Let's see what else. There was also a question about breaking up roots at the bottom of our transplants. So when we're pulling the plant, James was demoing kind of removing that plant from the pot, and should you kind of shake those roots or cut the roots at the bottom before planting into a pot? My suggestion with this is if the plant is root bound, meaning that the plant has tons of roots and they're all interconnected and really tightly woven, which you often will find, that's the case when you're getting plants, sometimes at the nursery. When you grow them yourselves, or you get them from a plant sale, you're often getting the timing just right with when that plant should be planted. And so you don't necessarily, usually they're not too root bound, and you can just plug them right into your pot and wouldn't need to loosen them up. So it just kind of depends on how tightly those roots are wound up. Okay, let's see, next question here. I have started apple seeds. If I get to sprout, how many can I leave in the container? So apple seeds might be a fun thing to sprout. Generally, you're probably not going to end up with an apple tree at the end of your sprouting. You certainly may, but most apple trees are grafted. So you're taking a rootstock that is really strong growing, and then you're grafting onto it a variety of the apple that you want to grow. And so you certainly can sprout apple seeds and have fun, watching them grow, but I wouldn't have the expectation that you're going to end up with apples at the end. So let's see, how many would I leave in the container? You would leave one in the container. You need a large container to grow a tree. All right.
Lila, I know you had a question about kind of which plants to put where. And so to answer your question, it really depends what 2 containers you have. If you have something like the small one that I shown, something like this, you really wouldn't be able to put 2 in here successfully. It would just be too small and overwhelm the soil. So in your example, you say kale, carrots, bok choy, and cilantro seeds, and you have 2 containers. So if you have one of these big containers like I was showing, your kale could maybe replace this Swiss chard here, and you could put the kale in and kind of in place of the Swiss chard, and then do your seeds next to it, for example, and that would definitely work in a bigger container like this. And then maybe your cilantro and bok choy would also kind of replace those 2, and you'd want to probably put them in a separate container, and definitely not something too small. So if you have 2 big ones, 2 big containers, you can definitely pick of the 4, you can pick 2 and put them in each one, and that should work fine. But if you have a small container, I wouldn't suggest kind of putting cilantro on a half and then seeds on a half. I'd maybe keep the cilantro on its own, or maybe put cilantro, could also maybe work next to your your kale. Maybe that would work in a bigger container for sure, but maybe not if the 2 containers are small. I would shy away from maybe planting them all in one container or 2 in a container, just to make sure that you'll be successful. 1 per container, if they're not too big, will definitely help you in getting some harvest and getting to see your plant grow to its full extent.
Awesome.
That's a good question about rabbits.
Rabbits, did you like us to cover that one?
Sure.
Rabbits, there was also a question about rats. Yeah, and I think Madeline kind of went over this a bit, but using physical barriers, right? So setting up a wire, like chicken wire around your pots is likely going to be the most successful way that you're going to prevent, either rabbits or rats or other rodents from getting to your plants. It doesn't look very beautiful though. Another option you can try is pepper spray. So you can make your own sprays that might deter specific rodents. So using peppers, you could either make your own spray or you could purchase your own kind of pepper sprays. And then, maybe moving them, trying out different options. Rodents can be hard thing to deal with.
Are rabbits the same as a rodent?
Yeah, I mean, I would put them in the same category. They're gonna eat your plants. Let's see what other questions we have here that we can get to. Oh, here's a question about how long does it take to grow kale, Swiss chard, spinach, and carrots? One of the students want to take that one? Julia, maybe?
Yeah. So it really is going to depend. We just sort of talked about this week. We had some bok choy that we had in the greenhouse, and it goes through the greenhouse so quickly. Whereas other plants, especially if you're thinking of tomato plants or pepper plants, are going to take a lot longer to go through the greenhouse. So kale, Swiss chard, spinach, and carrots. I think we're thinking of, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, around 4 to 6 weeks in the greenhouse if we're starting a kale or Swiss chard plant. And then it's going to go ahead and be transplanted out into the garden. And maybe we'll take another 3 to 4 weeks in the garden before, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before we're really able to harvest it, harvest large amounts from it. In terms of the spinach and the carrots, I would say a similar timeline for that. I mean, the carrots you're going to be direct seeding, but I would say a similar length of time in the ground. So maybe anticipating at least 6 weeks before you'll get a plant that you really are able to like see and recognize, and then maybe even a couple more weeks after that until you're able to harvest. And it does make a difference depending on the season that you're growing in. Over the winter, less sunlight is going to mean, and colder temperatures is going to mean that the growing is going to take a little bit longer. Over the summer, you'll notice a zucchini plant. If you are planting a zucchini plant, it is going to start cranking out zucchinis so quickly. You'll get it from seed and you'll be able to bring it outside of the greenhouse and plant it outside within, maybe 4 weeks. And so considering that as well, the time that you're planting, the season that you're planting in, how much sunlight your plant has access to is going to change the time in which it takes that plant to give something to you that is harvestable.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, and there are planting calendars that you can look at too, because like Julia was saying, each plant is going to have a different it's days to maturity is what we call that. So the days that from the date that you plant it to the day that you harvest it ranges depending on not just what type of plant, but also what variety it is. So sometimes there are certain varieties that we might grow. We might grow some, faster growing carrots. Carrots tend to be a little bit slower. They can usually be about 3 months. But we might grow, a faster growing carrot variety. So you can pick and choose, your when you're buying seeds, you can choose seeds that might be faster growing than others. And usually on the seed packet, if you're purchasing those seeds from seed, you'll see something that says days to maturity. And that's a rough estimate of how long it will take after you plant. However, of course, it depends on the time of year. So things grow, much slower in the winter time than they do in the spring and summer. So being aware of that. Let's see, we have a question about perlite in soils, and perlite is something that helps with drainage. So yes, perlite is something that we see a lot in potting soils and potting mixes, and there's no problem with having perlite in your soil. It just helps with making sure that soil doesn't get compacted and helps with the drainage.
Oh.
Barbara, to answer your question about which garden shops might give away some plastic pots, I'm bummed to hear that neither of the two that you went to gave them away, but I'd say that the ones that you went to probably do at some point. It just depends on kind of what they have around and if maybe people got them already, or if they just kind of have them in stock. So maybe it's something to kind of ask every time you're there, even if you don't need them, and kind of just keep stock. It's really just if you kind of get there and there is some around, I'm sure that they'll be happy to give some away. But yeah, they certainly don't all just kind of give them away for free whenever. So it's definitely kind of something you want to keep an eye on and kind of plan ahead for. And there's always the option to purchase some too.
Yeah, I had the best luck at Yamagami's. When I went to Summer Winds this past week, they didn't have any, other additional pots for me to take, but Yamagami's did have some storage in the back. And I was able to call, and they responded to my call within the day and told me that I could come in and pick some up. And also I just showed up before I heard back from them. I showed up and I talked to someone and he brought me right back to the pots. I think just explaining what you're doing, that you're trying to start a container garden in your backyard, they want to support you in that. So if they have the pots for you, hopefully they'll share them. And yeah, I had the best luck at Yamagami's.
Dorothy, do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Yeah, can I keep my vegetables growing in the pot? Do I have to transplant them?
It depends on the size of the pot. So if you have a small 4-inch pot, you can't really, there's not much that's going to grow in a 4-inch.
Well, I thought we had to have everything for this class. So I just went out and bought everything, even the pot. And so they're 1.7, whatever it is, pots. How big is that?
1.7 gallons or?
Huh. I don't know. I guess it's gallons. I don't know. No, it's got to be bigger than, no, maybe it is.
Can you show us with your hands how big the pot was? Oh, okay. It looks.
It's big. It's about that wide.
Okay, that sounds big enough. And what are you growing in there?
Well, what I bought today is lettuce and chard, Swiss chard, and I also got seeds for carrots and radishes. So,
great. James, can you take that question? Just he's been.
Yeah, one more time with what you had in the specific pot. Was it all 4 things?
No, I just bought them and I haven't.
Oh,
yeah.
And you have 2 of the big ones, or a big one and a small one?
2 of the same size.
2 of the same size, and so they're bigger than maybe something like this, right?
They're bigger than that.
Okay, so if you have one of the bigger guys like this, like something like this maybe,
probably about that.
Then yeah. So today it sounds like you had from your list, it sounds like you had chard as well as seeds, and that's exactly what I did in this pot. So I did chard on one side and seeds on the other.
Oh.
And then if in your other pot, you could probably fit both in the just in the top, just like a typical transplant. You'd put it right into the soil here, so you could probably fit all 4 of the things that you took home into the 2 pots.
Into the 2, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
but you'd want to separate it 2 in each. You wouldn't want to do 3 or.
No, I don't want.
And if you wanted, you could just do like maybe the chard in one of the big pots, and that would be totally fine as well. It grow nice and big if you just had 1 in there as well.
Okay. What about the lettuce? What about putting the lettuce and the radishes in one, and the Swiss chard and the carrots in another?
That sounds like a good plan. I think that'd totally work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought this thing started at 4:30. So
Oh, you're good.
So
we'll send out the recording to everybody, and so that you'll have the recording and you can.
And where are you located?
We're located at Santa Clara University. We're on the corner of Sherman and Benton Street.
Oh, I know. I like Santa Clara University.
Great. I'm just going to take one more question here about cleaning the pots before using. There generally isn't a need to clean the pots before using, unless you know that you're reusing the pot, and you know that, well, it might be a good idea. If you're getting pots from the nursery that are you're reusing, it might be a good idea to clean them with like a very diluted bleach solution. And the reason for this is to prevent the spread of plant diseases, and just to make sure that you're not contaminating your own garden with anything that came from the nursery. But you know, if you've been using those pots and they're not, you know, you don't have a plant disease, I wouldn't worry about cleaning them between uses.
I had a quick question in the chat about, can I use Oasis at the bottom of the pot instead of gravel for drainage? Because I've got a plug in my container that goes to a tube for the water to exit, and I don't want it to get clogged.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what Oasis is.
It's the green brick that florists use to put flowers in.
Oh,
It's like
Oh,
spongy kind of.
yeah,
oh, yeah.
that wouldn't be my top choice. I would, you know, if you're having a real issue with your holes getting clogged, I think gravel or another use. I just would worry about that breaking down, and also what chemicals are in there that then the plants are taking up and you're eating. Yeah, that wouldn't be my top choice.
Okay.
I would pick something that yeah, like something that's gonna block it, but not either gravel or broken up, terracotta pots. That's something that people commonly use for that purpose.
Could you put a pot in it and that would be a drainage?
Like a broken up terracotta pot. So like if you had a smashed terracotta pot, something that broke, you could break it up into small pieces. And that's just it's lighter, and it allows it prevents the soil from touching the holes and clogging them.
Oh, so you would put that at the bottom?
Yeah, you can. I don't think it's always necessary. Usually it's not a big issue, but if you're having issues with it, that would be what I'd recommend. All right.
And where do you get gravel?
You can pick that up from Home Depot, your local nursery, any kind of hardware store should have gravel.
Okay. Can you tell them a newcomer?
We welcome all the new questions. That's what this workshop is really about.
And again, I know someone said, I know we had said not to put gravel at the bottom. And again, this is something where it's kind of finding the best system for you. If you are finding that you're getting a lot of clogged drainage at the bottom of your container, then maybe try adding gravel, or adding, like Catherine was saying, crushed terracotta pots. But in our experience, we have never had a problem with that. And it's not a necessary thing to include, but if you come across the problem, then that's a potential solution to try, but not necessary unless you notice it being a problem.
All right, we got a lot of questions coming in. We would love to answer all your gardening questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. So we're gonna, we encourage you guys to join our future workshops. We will send out the recording of this class to everyone that has RSVP'd for the event. And I will also upload it to our YouTube page. So if you haven't checked out our YouTube page, we have a lot of really great videos up there that may answer some of your gardening questions. We have videos on composting and starting seeds and how to direct seed, all sorts of different stuff over at our YouTube page. So I encourage you guys to check that out. If you're not already on our newsletter, you guys can sign up for our newsletter to find out about our spring plant sale and any other upcoming workshops and events that we have here at the Forge Garden. And yeah, Julia just put a link into the chat for our YouTube channel, so you can find that there. And we thank you guys so much for joining us, and good luck with your container gardens. We'd love to see photos. Once you have your container garden up and going, please share photos with us, either by emailing us or tagging us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us at the Forge Garden, and we always love seeing what people are growing and hearing about their successes. So thank you all, and thank you to our student apprentices. You guys did a fabulous job, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.